We stand on God for thee.
Let the doors be open. Que l'on ouvre les portes. Thank you so much. Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The Honourable Member from Brampton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, it's time for Canada to recognize the state of Palestine. This Friday marks International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. For far too long, the Palestinian people have suffered being stateless. Canada has long supported a two-state solution. Canada took the first step towards diplomatic relations 30 years ago. Canada has a representative office in Ramallah. Palestine has a representative office in Ottawa. Time is past due to take the next step. Time is past due to stand up for what's right. End this misery. Preserve human rights. Recognize the state of Palestine. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Today I'm wearing pink to honor the life and legacy of a remarkable young girl, Bella Thompson, or as she's better known around the world, Bella Brave. Bella had a big personality and an even bigger TikTok following of 7 million people, where she would brighten your day with videos of her dancing, singing, and short music video collabs with her mom and even the Calgary Flames. Bella had to overcome many obstacles in her life. She was born without an immune system. She was a frequent visitor to the children's hospitals in both Saskatoon and Toronto and underwent a bowel transplant in 2023. She had every right to complain, but instead, she chose to use her life experience and platform to encourage other kids going through tough times and to spread the overflowing joy that she possessed. Having received an organ transplant, she was a strong advocate for signing up to be an organ donor and for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, to name a few. I want to leave you with the words of her mother, Kyla, after Bella passed away. Bella would want you to remember, God is love, be brave, and you're never too old to bring a stuffy.
The Honourable Member from Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker, cancer is a reality that will affect 2 in 5 Canadians, including my mother. Early detection is the key in the fight against this disease. There's many organizations who are working hard to support all the cancer patients, but the organizations like Cancer Warriors are at the forefront of supporting and empowering cancer patients. Last Friday, I was grateful to attend the 7th Annual Awareness and Fundraising Gala organized by Cancer Warrior founder Navneet Sharma, along with the board members Sita Mohan, Nisang, Indu, and Akshay. The event featured a survivor walk where 15 brave survivors showcased outfits designed by Dinesh K. Ramsey. This walk aimed to break the stigma associated with the cancer diagnosis. By raising awareness, offering hope, and empowering those affected, we can all contribute to saving lives. The work of Cancer Warriors exemplifies how collective efforts can make a major impact. Let us all be inspired and support the vital cause.
Here, here.
L'honorable député de...
The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, Le Pavois is celebrating its 35th anniversary. This organization was founded in Limoilou. Its goal is the social, professional, and educational integration of people living with mental health challenges. It offers support to enhance their quality of life through 3 social economy enterprises. At the heart of this organization, many women have distinguished themselves over the years. First, founder Vesta W. Jobidon, the first woman to believe in the organization. Then Lisette Boivin, who was the first CEO from 1989 to 2015. Today, Le Pavois is headed by Francine Cyr, a dedicated woman who always cares about the well-being of members. Thanks to these remarkable women, our community can count on a reliable and recognized mental health resource. To all those who've worked with us over the past 35 years, Thank you for your extraordinary work. The Honourable Member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognise an outstanding person from my community of Vaudreuil-Soulanges, Mr. Daniel Bissonnette. Mr. Bissonnette has been at the heart of the Musée Régional de Vaudreuil-Soulanges since 1981, including a remarkable 38-year period as CEO. Under his visionary leadership, the museum has grown not only in size, but also in reputation to become one of Quebec's most respected historical institutions. For over 40 years, Mr. Bissonnette has worked tirelessly to preserve and share our region's rich heritage. As Mr. Bissonnette prepares to enjoy a well-deserved retirement this December, I'd like to thank him for his significant contribution to the culture of Vaudreuil-Soulanges and of Quebec as a whole. Thank you, Daniel, for all you've done. On behalf of all those you've touched, we wish you a happy retirement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Perth-Wellington.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to pay tribute to the Mayor of the Township of Perth South, Jim Aitchison, following his sudden passing last week. Jim was dedicated to his family and his community. He was a proud life member of the Downey Optimist Club, and in politics, he was first elected as a Downey Ward councillor and would go on to serve as Deputy Mayor, Mayor, and 3 terms as Warden of Perth County. Jim served as Warden during some of the most challenging times the county has faced. Under Jim's leadership, significant efforts were made to improve mental health supports for first responders and the communities they serve. Jim was a no-nonsense type of leader, and while some of his advice may have used language that would not be considered parliamentary, you always knew where you stood with Jim. To his wife, Lori, and their kids, Kelly, Tracy, and Greg, I know that you are as proud of him as he was proud of you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Surrey-Newton.
Mr. Speaker, I'm honoured to welcome to Ottawa Mr. Jaspal Singh Manjpur, a human rights defender from Punjab. A distinguished lawyer, Mr. Manjpur has dedicated his career to defending religious minorities and others facing systemic discrimination. He has litigated landmark cases that now guide legal teams across the subcontinent in securing fundamental rights. As counsel for many political prisoners, he advocates for freedom of expression and dissent. Beyond the courtroom, he advocates for policy reform and has authored many reports on human rights in India. Guided by Sikh principle of Sarvatada Pala, the welfare of all, Mr. Manjpur exemplifies the fight for justice, dignity, and human rights. I urge all members to join me in thanking him for his service.
The Honourable Member for Scarborough Centre.
Mr. Speaker, food insecurity is an issue for many families, and I would like to recognize an organization making a difference in our community. Feed Scarborough, more than just simply a food bank. Feed Scarborough has embraced the UN Sustainable Development Goals as a guiding framework. This means their commitment goes beyond hunger, creating pathways towards economic stability, educational growth, health, and environmental sustainability. Their food bank is complemented with services and programs to reduce poverty, promote quality education, promote gender equality, and to support economic growth. Their Healthy Meal program provides over 2,000 nutritious, balanced meals weekly, and their School Hamper program partners with local schools to provide nutritious food hampers to families in need, ensuring children have the energy and focus for an academic success. I would like to thank the team and volunteers at Feed Scarborough for their commitment to addressing food insecurity in Scarborough, and I encourage all who can to support their local food banks. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Government documents show about 1.1 million temporary resident visas will expire by the end of next year. Yet when asked at committee how his department will ensure these individuals leave once their visas expire, the immigration minister had no plan. After 9 years of mismanagement, the minister's only solution is to hope people leave voluntarily. At committee, he deflected, offering vague answers about monitoring and partner organizations. Canadians deserve better than a minister who cannot explain how his own department enforces immigration rules. We need a Canada First plan that will fix the immigration system they broke. Canada needs a serious, enforceable immigration plan that protects our system's integrity. The Prime Minister's YouTube videos and bogus claims on immigration only create more chaos, mismanagement, and uncertainty. The PM claimed in the same YouTube fantasy video that immigration would balance out. Speaker, immigration will balance itself? Who is he kidding? Only common sense conservatives will fix this broken liberal immigration system.
The Honourable Member for Markham Unionville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to start first to wish my granddaughter a happy 15th birthday. Canadians have faced much strife through challenging years in their everyday life. Our government hears them. We're here to bring cheer. Just last week, the Prime Minister made it clear we're stepping up big at this time of the year. Starting December the 14th, here's the decree. Many daily goods will be tax-free. Saving like these, where it matters most, gives family a break they can really toast. Yet across the aisle, there's a bitter scene. The Conservatives sulk in a Grinch-like routine. While we deliver joy, they just complain. Stealing holiday hopes is their usual refrain. But Canadians know the Conservative heart are too small to support families struggling, one and all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Cumberland Colchester.
Mr. Speaker, it is National Addictions Awareness Week. Canadians commemorate the countless precious lives lost from the plague of drug use. 47,000 Canadians have died due to drug overdose since 2015, including more than 8,000 last year alone. Every person had dreams, hopes, and aspirations. None of them wanted to become addicted to drugs, and none of them wanted to die. They deserve better. Their families deserve better. All Canadians deserve better than a failing government who thinks the best way to fight overdose crisis is to flood the streets with more drugs. We need to fully reverse the liberalization of drugs, which is killing Canadians and threatening our borders. We need to ban precursor drugs, prosecute every trafficker, and we need to science-based prevention, treatment, and recovery. This madness must stop. A common-sense Conservative government will put an end to this terrible experiment, and we will have a Canada First plan to secure our borders and bring our loved ones home drug-free. Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Kenora.
After 9 years, this NDP Liberal coalition is alive and well, and Canadians know that they are not worth the cost. Do you remember when the NDP leader made a big stunt about ripping up his deal with the Liberals? Right. He said then, Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. But now, Mr. Speaker, even when Liberal MPs are calling for a new Prime Minister, the NDP leader continues to support this government no matter the cost.
Unbelievable.
He supports the carbon tax, which he has voted to increase over 24 times. He supports inflationary deficits that are driving up the cost of living. He supports soft on-crime policies that have risen violent crime by 50% across the country. And he has said he would fight like hell for Canadian workers, but is nowhere to be seen when we are facing a threat of American terrorists. Mr. Speaker, it is time for a carbon tax election so that Canadians can vote for our Canada First plan to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Sydney, Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, I love Christmas music. If We Make It Through December is one of my favorites, about the difficult times that families experience during the holiday season. On December 14th, our government will help families by pausing the tax on essential items like groceries, toys, children's clothing, holiday goodies, and even Christmas trees. But Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition, he's a mean one, Mr. Grinch, and he doesn't want your Christmas tax break. That is, unless it benefits his wealthy oil and gas donors.
Yeah.
And while Conservatives on the naughty list still refuse to get security checks, on this side of the House, we're making sure Canadians don't have a blue Christmas. Across Canada, we're giving smart policy instead of cheap slogans, bringing joy to children, and helping restaurants thrive, all to make sure that it's the most wonderful time of
Order, please. Order. The honourable member for Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, every 6 days, another woman is killed by intimate partner violence. Today is one of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, a call to action to challenge the systems, the laws, and the attitudes that lead to violence against women, girls, and gender-diverse individuals. In Canada, gender-based violence is an epidemic, one that disproportionately impacts Indigenous women, racialized women, migrant women, and members of the 2S LGBTQ+ community. On December 6th, I will join the City of Victoria's vigil to honor the 14 women killed in the École Polytechnique massacre, victims of misogynistic violence. But it's not enough to commemorate, it's not enough to pledge, we need concrete action. The government has failed to deliver sustainable funding for shelters, failed to provide affordable housing, failed to implement the calls to justice from the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. Enough is enough. Everyone deserves to live free from violence.
L'honorable député d'Abitibi.
The honourable member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Today, we celebrate the extraordinary achievement of one of Quebec's most important voices, Pierre Houde, who's been inducted into the HoC Hall of Fame. On November 11th, he received the Foster Hewitt Award, presented by the NHL Broadcasters Association, to honor a member of the radio and TV industry for his contribution to his profession and to hockey in general. He is, my word, the fourth francophone to win this award, following in the footsteps of René Lacavalière, Richard Garneau, and Gilles Tremblay. Hockey fans have been treated to Pierre Houde's dulcet tones on RDS for 36 years. But Pierre Houde doesn't just do hockey, he's also our Formula One commentator and the voice of the Olympics. Mr. Houde, thank you for your passion, your respect for the French language, and your careful preparation. Thank you for guiding sports fans through so many battles. Wishing all Quebecers a Stanley Cup with you soon. We want to hear you say it over and over again very soon. He shoots, he scores!
Order. À l'ordre. The honourable member for Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, Canada trades nearly twice as much with the United States as it does all other countries combined. 40% of our economy is tied to that relationship. But this week, President-elect Trump threatened a 25% tariff on all goods. And after 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, we are unprepared for this crisis. The economy is shrinking. Food prices have risen 37% faster here than in the U.S. Canadians now carry the highest household debt in the G7. Canadian housing inflation is the worst it's ever been, and our military is in shambles. We need a Canada First plan. The Prime Minister must cancel his plan to hike carbon tax by 61 cents a litre. He needs to stop his reckless energy cap on what will cut Alberta and Saskatchewan production by 35%. And he must reverse his billion-dollar cut to the military and invest in securing our borders against illegal fentanyl imports and exports. Canada needs leadership. Leadership with the brains and the backbone to stand up to this country, to stand up for Canada. As Laurier said, Canada first, Canada last, Canada always. Let's bring it home!
Order. The honourable member from Fleetwood, the honourable member for Fleetwood Port Kells.
Mr. Speaker, when someone tells you who they are, it's wise to believe them. When the leader of the opposition demonstrates an authoritarian personality, we better pay close attention. Dr. Jennifer Gunter, New York Times women's health columnist, warns that conservatives have proposed and voted for forced birth legislation 9 times. All have been defeated, but if those come back, and I think he'd let them, we have a conservative leader who tells us he'd use the notwithstanding clause to override our charter protections. We have a conservative leader who disregards voices from corporate Canada, but he'll take their money. He says he'll bully cities to ignore voices from our neighbourhoods on property development. He spies on and muzzles his own MPs who Canadians thought they were their voice in Parliament. He, like his mentor Stephen Harper, is a party of one. He treats his own caucus with an iron fist. Would he do the same with the rest of the Canadians? Who knows? But it's best not to give him the chance.
Oral questions. Questions orales.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Canadians are facing the threat of tariffs by the United States. Now, what's the situation here after 9 years with this Prime Minister? Our economy is weak. Our armed forces, our military is weak. Our borders are weak. The Prime Minister himself is weak. When will we finally have an election so that Canadians can choose themselves a strong leader who will protect the economy and put Canada first? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, how ironic. We've given the Conservative Party a chance to put Canadians first, but what do? Well, they vote against initiatives that would help Canadians. They voted against dental care. They vote against the school food program. They voted against more spots in daycare. And they're going to vote against the tax break we're offering Canadians to help them over the next few months. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party leader rises every day to block help for Canadians. He's only thinking about his own interests, not what's best for Canadians. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. This Prime Minister is just too weak. He is too weak to protect our economy against Donald Trump's threats. For 3 weeks now, it's been 3 weeks since the President-elect was elected. He's been repeating his threats for weeks. And what's the Prime Minister's plan? A Zoom call. A Zoom call with provincial premiers who feel that this Prime Minister is too weak. Quebec will send the Quebec Provincial Police to protect its borders. Alberta says that this Prime Minister is not defending and standing up for our economy. When will we have an election so that we can get ourselves a strong leader who will protect our economy? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, while the Conservative Party leader is playing petty partisan politics and putting on a show in this House, we are working every day to help Canadians. Members of Parliament represent their constituents here in this place. That's what we're doing on this side. But on the other side, everyone is just helping the Conservative leader rather than constituents. We are helping with school food, with daycare. They're not supporting that. They say that everything is broken, but they're the ones trying to break everything for Canadians. We're here to invest in Canadians. They're here to sow chaos and discord, to break things, to not help Canadians. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Face an unprecedented threat from President Trump's potential tariffs. And what is the state of things here in Canada? Our economy is weakened. Our borders are weakened. Our military is weakened. And most of all, our Prime Minister is weakened. Why can't we have a carbon tax election so Canadians can choose a leader with the brains and backbone to protect our economy and put Canada first?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, while the Leader of the Opposition focuses on himself and on me, we're staying focused on Canadians. We're investing in the kinds of things that are going to help people. We stood up for dental care. We stood up to deliver a school foods program. We're moving forward with more spaces of $10 a day childcare, all things that the Conservative Party voted against. But most recently, Mr. Speaker, they've announced they're going to be voting against the GST break for Canadians over the next couple of months, something that's going to help people at a time where they need that little extra help. But he doesn't care about helping Canadians. He just wants them to suffer more, so maybe he has a chance.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he's lost control of our borders. He's lost control of immigration. He's lost control of spending. And with that erratic performance, we now see that he's lost control of himself. No wonder foreign leaders believe they can walk all over him. They see him as a weak, incompetent leader who does not even have the support of his own party. Yes. Why won't he put the country first for a change, allow a carbon tax election so Canadians can have a prime minister who will protect this country?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
You can tell he stood up all night against the mirror trying to practice that line. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we've got our sleeves rolled up. We are fighting for Canadians every single day. We will stand up for good Canadian jobs. We will make sure we continue to have great relations with the United States as we build a stronger future on both sides of the border. We're going to continue to deliver the kinds of things that matter for Canadians. Dental care, free insulin, school food programs, all programs that Conservatives voted against, and now they're going to vote against a GST break for Canadians right across the country for the next few months. That's not being there for Canadians, that's being there for himself.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Just to prove how weak and out of control he's become, he just engaged in a mass hallucination, listing off a bunch of programs that actually don't even exist outside of his own head. But if he's not prepared to stand up for the country when it comes to trade, then why don't we have a real election about taxes? He can run on his tiny 2-month tax trick, and I'll run on my common sense plan to axe the tax and axe the sales tax on new homes. How about a carbon tax election now?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We saw it perfectly clearly just now, the fact that he is trying to gaslight Canadians. He just said that the dental care program, to pick one, doesn't even exist. Well, tell that to the 1 million plus Canadians who've gone to see the dentist, many for the first time in years, because of the Canada Dental Care benefit. This is what he's standing against. He's trying to convince Canadians that everything's broken while he forces his MPs to vote against a GST break that's going to help Canadians over the coming months. That's not leadership. That's pandering to the lowest common denominator.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has everyone unanimously against him and his so-called Christmas present. Canadians don't want it, business owners don't want it, retirees don't want it, students don't want it, economists don't want it. Even those who are well off and kind-hearted, they don't want it. No one wants the Prime Minister's Christmas gift. When will the Prime Minister understand that one cannot buy votes? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are struggling. That's why we are offering a tax break to all Canadians for the next few months. A tax break at the restaurant, at the grocery store. We know that Canadians are struggling these days. We have one of the best financial situations of all G7 countries, and that means that we're able to help Canadians a little bit. The Bloc might not want that, but that's because the Bloc Québécois, Mr. Speaker, all they want is to pick fights and squabbles. They don't want the government to truly help Canadians and Quebecers, but despite them in their opposition, that's exactly what we're going to do.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, Canadians who are struggling are those who will not receive a rebate check. You know who is struggling, Mr. Speaker? The Liberals themselves. The Conservatives don't seem to support the proposal. The NDP neither. The Bloc Québécois neither. No one in this House seems to support the rebate check. If the Prime Minister is so sure of himself, why doesn't he make it a matter of confidence and have a confidence vote? Order, please.
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît.
Order, please.
Le très honorable Premier ministre.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. It's clear, Mr. Speaker, that opposition parties want a political excuse to vote against something that Canadians do want. Canadians need a tax break. That's exactly what we are giving them. It will be up to opposition parties to decide whether they want to be there for their constituents, to be there for Canadians who are struggling, or if they prefer playing petty partisan politics and picking fights. The Bloc and the Conservatives want to say that Canada's broken, but we on this side are here for Canadians to support them and to help them when times are tough.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie.
Monsieur le Président, trouvez l'erreur.
Mr. Speaker, tell me what's wrong with this picture. On the one hand, we have Danielle, who is retired for medical reasons. Her disability income is $45,000 a year. On the other hand, we have her spouse, who earns $125,000 a year. Who's going to receive a $250 check in the spring? Yes, that's right. According to the Liberals, her spouse should receive a check, but not Danielle herself. She's being punished because she's too sick to work. That makes no sense whatsoever. My question to the Prime Minister is simple. What does he have to say to Danielle and to all retirees?
J'aimerais juste signaler à tous les députés.
I would like to say to all members to please be very careful in their choice of words.
Bon côté, de notre,
They should pick words that are accepted. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Dans cette chambre depuis assez longtemps.
I've been in this house for long enough, Mr. Speaker, long enough to remember a time when the NDP stood up for Canada's workers. In fact, they were the party of workers in Canada. Now, workers who have been shouldering a heavy burden throughout the pandemic, throughout the inflation crisis, they have done so much, and we have supported them. We're also supporting seniors and young people. But with this measure, with this rebate, we want to acknowledge the hard work of workers who need our support. The NDP is against it. The party that truly stands for workers is not the NDP, it's the government.
Member for Cowichan and Malahat Langford.
Like most Canadians, seniors are doing what they can to get by, but things are tough. The Liberals have let people down, watching as seniors struggle to even buy their groceries. The Liberals' latest disappointment, cutting seniors out of their $250 rebate. Meanwhile, the Conservatives rub elbows with the same grocery CEOs who are jacking up costs. Will the Prime Minister listen and give seniors a much-needed break? I mean, come on, even his own MPs are asking for him to fix this.
Yeah, fix it!
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I remember when the party of Tommy Douglas, of Ed Broadbent, of Jack Layton was actually a party that stood up for workers. But now that we have a government that is recognizing that workers carried us through this pandemic, the Canadian workers saw us through one of the worst global inflation crises the world has ever seen, and that we want to give them support because we know things are tough for workers, not to take away anything from the help we're giving seniors or youth. We want to be there for workers, and the NDP is suddenly against benefits for workers. It makes no sense, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
No sense, Mr. Speaker. I couldn't agree more. Here we have the NDP claiming to have torn up their deal, their carbon tax coalition, with the Prime Minister. But then they taped it back together when he promised a 2-month tax trick. Then, after taking credit for it, the NDP says they didn't know what was in it. Right. And now they're opposed to it. Mr. Speaker, these two leaders can't even figure out how to give away $6 billion properly. Isn't it time for a carbon tax election so that we can elect a common-sense government?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, MPs are supposed to represent their constituents here in Ottawa, but the Conservative Party MPs are choosing to represent their leader back in their constituency. I know Canadians across the country, including in Conservative ridings, are looking forward to paying no taxes on meals in restaurants or on all groceries or on kids' clothes for the next few months. But the leader is making them vote against these measures to help Canadians. If Conservative MPs want to stand up for Canadians, they need to stand up against their leader.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think Canadians are ready to stand up and speak for themselves. The Prime Minister wants to lecture us about democracy. Then why don't we have a referendum? A referendum election where the choice will be the following. A tiny 2-month tax trick with the NDP Liberals, or a permanent axing of the carbon tax and axing the sales tax on new homes. Why not let Canadians decide now?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, for the Leader of the Opposition to end the price on pollution would mean to end the Canada carbon rebate that comes to people's homes 4 times a year and delivers more money to middle-class Canadians than the price on pollution actually costs, while at the same time decreasing emissions. And in regards to housing, his failed housing proposal was to cut billions of dollars from cities across this country that they're investing in building housing. That would drive up property taxes for homeowners. That would make it harder to build homes. He has a proposal that is electorally interesting for him, but won't do anything for Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Electorally interesting. That's his condescending way of saying Canadians actually like my plan. Because Canadians have figured out that after 9 years of this weak Prime Minister, spending $80 billion on housing, with the result being the doubling of housing costs, that spending billions more won't make any difference. We're going to slash that bureaucracy and use the savings to axe the sales tax on Canadian homes. Why won't he let Canadians decide?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mayors from Kelowna, Abbotsford, Ucluelet, all in Conservative ridings across the country are speaking up that the investments we're making in the Housing Accelerator is helping them cut red tape, increase densification, create more homes more quickly. And the plan the Conservative Party has put forward to remove those billions of dollars from municipalities, just as they're tackling the housing crisis, would harm Canadians. But the Leader of the Opposition doesn't care about harming Canadians. What he wants to do is gain power, and he'll do anything he can to do that. While we stay focused on Canadians, he's focused on himself.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has run a groundbreaking experiment. He's put billions of dollars in a sack and offered it to politicians, and the finding? They're willing to accept the money. Incredible. A groundbreaking sociological study. He wants to give more money to local politicians who block home building. We want to use the same money to cut taxes for the people who buy homes and build homes. Why won't we allow Canadians to decide whether they want the money to go to the politicians or to the people in a carbon tax election?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, at least the Conservative leader is true to form in that he would rather pick fights with everyone than actually deliver for Canadians. We know, as we saw during the pandemic, as we've seen through the inflation challenges, working together with the provinces, working together with municipalities to get things built for Canadians is what they want. What does the Leader of the Opposition do? He insults people, but then he also votes against direct money in Canadians' pockets, whether it's with investments in childcare or dental care, whether it's investments in taking the tax off of groceries for the next few months. These are things that he's standing against out of political self-interest.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Just shows how out of control he's become. He can't stay on a subject. He brings up housing, so I agree. I just threw away my script and said, let's debate housing. So he now changes the subject back to his 2-month tax trick. Well, here's the trick, everyone. After the tax break runs out in February, they're going to hike the carbon tax on heat, housing, gas, and groceries, all as a part of a plan to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. So will he get himself under control, show some strength for a change, and call a carbon tax election?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, every day I get up in this House, I talk about one thing and one thing only, Canadians, and how we are there to help Canadians, how we're there to grow a stronger economy for Canadians, with direct investments that will support them, with free insulin, with dental care, with more spaces in child care, all things that the Leader of the Opposition is voting against. Yes, we're investing in the most ambitious housing solution that this country has ever seen, things that he didn't do when he was Stephen Harper's failed housing minister. We're going to continue to stand up and fight for Canadians while the Leader of Opposition gets up, pulls off his little performances, and fights against me.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He said he was going to talk about one thing, and then he rambled on about 10 or 15 things, all things he hallucinates that one day he might do if only he were given another 9 years in office, Mr. Speaker. Instead of talking about his real record, which is that he doubled housing costs, he doubled food bank use, he doubled the debt, and now he wants to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. Mr. Speaker, we need a Prime Minister who's in control of himself, so why doesn't he call a carbon tax election so we can get one?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'll say it again. The Canada Carbon Rebate puts more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians. But the Leader opposite wants to talk about one thing. He talks about food banks. Let's talk about the school food program. This is a program that sends federal dollars directly into school boards, directly to support delivering good food programs for kids. No bureaucracy, just investments in school food programs. The Conservative Leader voted against it, and worse, he forced his own MPs to vote against it, to stand up against their constituents and side with him instead of in Canadians who need help.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, imagine what we could do with $6 billion. Everyone in this House has already voted on a measure for more money for retirees aged 65 to 74. We could put $3 billion in housing, for instance, which would help families. The problem, though, Mr. Speaker, is that the Prime Minister doesn't seem to realize that most of this House no longer has confidence in him. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, from coast to coast to coast, Canadians are struggling. That's why we are helping them directly with a 2-month tax break to help them get through difficult times. We are also offering direct support to workers, those who have been working for a long time. As for seniors, we've invested heavily in them over the past few years. We've also invested significantly in young people. Workers need support too. This rebate will deliver direct support to workers, support that they need. But once again, the Bloc Québécois is just looking for a fight. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. It's clear that retirees and young people must be pretty confused hearing that they've been helped so significantly. Mr. Speaker, no one wants these Christmas goodies, these presents. The Liberal Party of Canada's members of Parliament and all other members here voted in favour of equality for retirees. I think people are ready to pay a certain level of taxes if their money is going to be handled and spent properly. Is the Prime Minister ready to move a confidence vote on his new measures? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois has Bloc Québécois opposition days during which they can set the agenda in the House. Meanwhile, we will continue to work to support seniors, which is what we've been doing for a long time. We will continue to take good care of seniors. We will continue to invest in them. We also want to invest in workers to acknowledge the hard work that they do, to acknowledge the struggles they've been through with global inflation, with the pandemic. We're here to support them. If the Bloc Québécois wishes to vote against workers, then they can feel free to do so, and then they can explain that to workers in Quebec and elsewhere. We're here to support workers. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. We need a plan. We need a plan to protect our economy from President Trump's threats. Americans and Canadian provincial premiers have raised issues of chaos at our borders and within our immigration system. There are 4.9 million visas and permits which will expire in the next 13 months, give or take. If people leave Canada to go to the States illegally, there will be consequences for our economy. What is the plan to guarantee that those who should leave Canada will indeed do so? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, every year in our country, thousands of residence permits, tourist visas, and other visas expire and people return to their countries. We have mechanisms and processes in our immigration systems and at our borders to ensure that people leave when they are supposed to and to ensure that there are consequences when they do not do so. We will continue to keep those systems working. We have also made adjustments in immigration to ensure that immigration meets the challenges of today. We have taken action to strengthen our borders. We are here for Canadians. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. But his minister said that it would be impossible to even track whether people do, in fact, leave Canada. The Immigration Minister's Department, the Department of Immigration, just published a statement saying that's according to sources, the number of people who should have left Canada already but are still here is between 20,000 and 500,000. But that there could be even more. There could be more than 500,000 people here who should have left. Mr. Speaker, where's the plan? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we just put forward an immigration plan to bring down immigration levels over the next few years. This will allow home building and the economy to catch up. To meet people's needs. For example, we had more immigrants to address labor shortages. Now, we will, of course, keep our borders strong and protect the integrity of our borders. This is what Canadians expect. This is something we deliver and will continue to deliver. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Our borders, if we're going to protect our economy from President Trump's tariff threats, the Americans and the premiers are all concerned the Prime Minister is too weak to do that. And the data from his own immigration department confirm that fact. According to documents produced by his ministry, there are between 20,000 and 500,000 people in Canada that are not supposed to be here. And there are another 3 million that have to leave within the next year. What is the plan to ensure that people who should leave do leave?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, every year there are visitor visas and work permits and student visas that expire, and every year the vast majority of those people return home to their countries. We have procedures and processes in place to make sure that that does happen. We have consequences if they don't. We will continue to strengthen those. But continuing to talk down our country, continue to talk down our systems is something that the Leader of the Opposition is doing because he's more focused on trying to get elected than he is on actually solving the problems Canadians are facing. That's why we continue to step up and deliver on the needs of Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Another weak answer from a weak leader, Mr. Speaker. The reality is he says that people just voluntarily leave when their permits and visas are up. But his minister admitted this week that that is impossible to prove because they don't keep track. And The closest thing they could get to an answer was their department saying estimates from academic sources range from between 20,000 and 500,000 persons, although there may be more. We're talking about people who should not be in our country. So once again, what is the plan?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, once again, we laid out an immigration plan just a few weeks ago that talks about how we're going to make sure that our immigration numbers allow for our economy to catch up, for our home building to catch up. We have a strong and robust immigration system that has delivered for Canadians over decades now. And the fact that the Leader of the Opposition continually throws up his hands to say that Canada is broken is talking down not just our institutions, but Canadians themselves. Canadians are optimistic and ambitious about the future. That's why we continue to invest in them. His answer is cuts to services, cuts to benefits, cuts to Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister promised that Canadians would see real change to our electoral system. It's been 9 years, and in true Liberal fashion, he broke this promise and let Canadians down. Clearly, this was an election year tactic, and the result, Mr. Speaker, increased division, partisan games, and a lack of representation in Canada's Parliament. And the Conservatives, well, they sure don't want to make it better because they only care about the profits of their rich corporate friends. Will the Prime Minister tell Canadians why he dropped the ball on electoral reform?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I very much care about electoral reform. I've been very clear that I would bring in a ranked ballot tomorrow if we had that option. But really, to see the NDP turning its back on workers right now, asking a question about electoral reform when Canadians are worried about whether or not the opposition parties are going to support the tax break that they need or the investments in workers that they deserve. Right now, we need a party and a parliament that is focused on helping and supporting Canadians as they get us all through this difficult time with their hard work, with their ambition. And right now, talking about politics is the last thing Canadians want to see from this House.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Griesbach.
Mr. Speaker, what the Prime Minister isn't saying is the fact that seniors and persons with disabilities are workers. No one should have to work more than one full-time job in order to put a roof over their head or to afford food. But a recent report from the Edmonton suggests that the minimum wage just isn't enough to survive. People are having to make tough choices. They cannot afford their groceries, they cannot afford their medication, and they cannot afford their rent. But the Liberals are holding up relief by excluding seniors and persons with disabilities in the $250 rebate. Worse yet, the Conservatives would cut. Will the Liberals stop letting Canadians down during this difficult time?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as of next year, because of this government, Canadians with disabilities will be receiving $200 every single month. That is making a real difference in the lives of Canadians living with disabilities, and we know there is more to do, and we will be doing more. In regards to workers, it's astonishing to see the new Democratic Party of Canada turn its back on workers and say that workers don't deserve a little support. Workers don't deserve to be recognized for the efforts that they did to get us through the pandemic, to get us through the global inflation crisis. These are things that we're standing up to see and recognize workers, and the NDP is blocking it.
The Honourable Member for Kingston and the Islands.
Mr. Speaker, last week our government announced measures that will provide financial supports for Canadians over the holidays. These measures should be supported by all MPs. However, we know the Leader of the Opposition has muzzled his members. According to one Conservative MP, we recently learned that, quote, everybody is being watched. What we say, what we do, who we talk to, end quote. The Leader of the Conservative Party has gone so far as to stop his MPs from asking the government for supports. Can the Prime Minister explain why the Leader of the Opposition should unmuzzle his MPs and allow them to support Canadians instead of forcing them to repeat his embarrassingly bad slogans?
That question is not regarding the administration of government. I see that the Prime Minister is standing, but that question administration of government. Stop, please. Order, please. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it looks like the member for Kingston is not getting into cabinet after all.
There you go.
Some people bring happiness wherever they go, others bring happiness whenever they go. Mr. Speaker, this is a 2-month tax trick that will print cash, add to inflation, and make Canadians worse off. And if the Prime Minister disagrees, why won't he stop being so weak? Why won't he have the courage to call a carbon tax election and allow Canadians to vote to axe the tax?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, Canadians elect members of Parliament to be their voice in Ottawa, not Ottawa's voice or their leader's voice in their communities. But the Conservative leader shamefully puts his own interests ahead of Canadians. We announced a tax break for all Canadians, a $250 rebate to put more money in the pockets of working Canadians, and Conservative MPs know their constituents want this, need this, and support this, but the Conservative leader is muzzling them and forcing them to vote against direct support for Canadians. Shame on him.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister's radical liberalization of hard drugs has been lethal for Canadians, 47,000 of whom have died of overdoses since this Prime Minister took office, more than died in the Second World War fighting for Canada. Overdose deaths are up 200%, and now our American friends say they may hit us with tariffs because of the Prime Minister's liberal policies on fentanyl. How many lives and jobs is this Prime Minister willing to sacrifice for his radical liberal agenda?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we are using all the tools at our disposal to save lives and keep communities safe for everyone. Meanwhile, Conservatives are choosing to use struggling people as political props to spread fear and misinformation. From the very beginning, we have been there to work on an evidence-based, compassionate public policy, public health approach. We have been there and we will always be there to work with provinces and territories to meet this time of crisis. While the Conservative leader plays politics, we're going to be there to support Canadians grounded in science and evidence.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, the science and evidence are now proven. After 9 years of radical liberalization of drugs, overdose deaths are up by 200%. And the worst overdose numbers come from British Columbia, where the policies have been most radically and enthusiastically implemented. But the NDP Liberals claimed that they were backtracking on decriminalization because it became so unpopular. Just this week, NDP Liberals voted for a committee report that called for full legalization of hard drugs. Will the Prime Minister admit that is his real agenda?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, having an evidence-based and a science-based approach, compassionate public policy approach grounded in health care to the opioid epidemic is what we need to do, not just to save lives, but to create safer communities. While the Leader of the Opposition plays politics and uses suffering people as props to propagate a brokenist view of this country, we're going to continue to roll up our sleeves, work hard with provinces and territories to respond to this tragedy, to make sure we're putting Canadians first in everything we do.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister's radical drug agenda is not the only thing that is broken. Our economy is broken as well. We now have 2 million people forced to go to food banks every single month, a 38% increase in chronic homelessness, 1,400 homeless encampments, and just today, Equifax reported that consumer debt is $2.5 trillion. We have the worst household debt of all G7 countries. When will he call a carbon tax election so that we can fix everything he broke?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the answers the Conservative leader is putting forward to the challenges of Canadians facing homelessness or the challenges of food banks is to cut the programs that are actually investing in direct supports for people. Whether it's money we're investing in municipalities and provinces to reduce encampments and to build more homes quicker, he wants to cut that. Whether it's the money we're moving forward directly to schools across the country so they can deliver more schools, more food, and take pressure off of grocery bills, he's voted against that, Mr. Speaker. His only agenda is cuts and austerity while we help Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. We told them. The Journal de Montréal reveals a surge in asylum requests at the border. The Lacal border crossing received more than 80 applications between Saturday and Sunday, about 7 times the recent average. A vice president of the Customs Union has said that in terms of employees, they're not ready to take on many people. And it confirms 2 things. 1, we were right to predict a rise in migration caused by Donald Trump. 2, we were right to predict that the federal government isn't ready, as usual. When will this Prime Minister take action at the borders? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, once again, this is just anything we're hearing from the Bloc. We renegotiated the Safe Third Country Agreement with which makes sure people who come to border crossings must do their asylum request at the first safe country where they find themselves. This means in the U.S., Mr. Speaker. And yes, we did solve this issue with the U.S. By renegotiating this agreement, and the Bloc is ignoring this. They're just looking for squabbles rather than reflecting real facts. We're always going to take care of our borders rigorously. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. It's mind-boggling. Everyone warned them. We knew the Liberals were no good with the border, so the Bloc warned them, even before the U.S. election, that if Donald Trump won, there would be a surge in migration to the border. Quebec warned them, immigration lawyers warned them, organization warned them. We warned them as well, Mr. Speaker. And then, just as asylum requests start to climb, the union tells us that it's short-staffed at the border. And once again, the Prime Minister has no plan. Is he doing it on purpose, Mr. Speaker? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague is so proud of his written question that he didn't even hear my answer to his first question. We renegotiated the Safe Third Country Agreement with the United States to ensure that people who come to our border crossings should have presented themselves to the U.S. to seek asylum rather than coming to Canada. We do have a solution to this issue, a solution that we implemented as a government, but the Bloc doesn't want to recognize the facts. They just want to scare Quebecers. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. We have a Prime Minister who is weak and a weak economic position. Facing the threats from Donald Trump, Mr. Speaker, now we're learning that the PM doesn't even know the extent of the deficit. Spending's out of control, and it goes up day by day when the PM is trying to buy the support of the Bloc and the NDP to keep himself in power. So I ask him the question again very slowly. How much is the deficit of the Government of Canada? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we will present our economic statement shortly, and the opposition leader can react to that. But I know full well that he will already vote against it, like he voted against all the initiatives that we established to help Canadians. Like, for example, our tax break that is coming up in the coming months for Canadians. He doesn't think that Canadians need this. We have the best fiscal situation of all our G7 partners, and he refuses to help Canadians. Why? Because he'd rather people be in a difficult situation to vote for him, but we are going to be here to help Canadians. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. He is a weak Prime Minister that has lost control. He lost the control of the borders, lost control on migration, lost control of public spending. So he says that he can't say how big the deficit is, even though he already had a budget for this year. That's strange. That's the first time I've heard that from a Prime Minister. So we'll ask an easier question. What was the deficit of the government of Canada last year? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, while the Conservative leader continues to block and vote against initiatives that will help Canadians, he is trying to find ways to attack me. But we will be tackling and helping support for Canadians. We will be creating a tax break in coming months that the Conservatives will vote against. We're going to deliver assistance for workers that the Conservatives will vote against, like they voted against dental care, like they voted against school food programs, like they voted against more daycare spots. They don't want Canadians to do better because he wants to convince everyone that everything's broken. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Prime Minister who's lost control of everything. He's lost control of the borders, lost control of immigration, and lost control of spending. Recently it came to light that the deficit is much bigger than his finance minister reported in the recent budget. Now, the Prime Minister claims that he can't tell us what the deficit is for this year. Okay, so we'll make it easier for him. What was the deficit last year?
Yeah. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we see the lengths to which the Conservative leader will go to not talk about the fact that we are proposing a tax break for Canadians over the coming months, because he's going to vote against that, Mr. Speaker. He's going to vote against direct help for families at the grocery store, with children's clothes, with supports for Canadians in everyday expenses. Why? Because he'd rather continue to see Canadians suffer, because maybe that'll help him get elected, rather than actually solve the challenges that Canadians are facing. Well, we're stepping up to deliver on dental care, on school foods, on initiatives that directly help workers. That's what we'll continue to do.
The Honourable Member for Sudbury. Mr. Speaker, like everywhere else, affordability is an important issue in my riding. Sudbury workers were pleased to learn that they will receive a $250 check to support them. Can the Prime Minister tell Canadians what other measures have been announced to support them as the holidays approach? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I'd like to thank the member for Sudbury for her question and for her hard work. We know that the last few years have been tough, and that's why we're going to give a tax break to all Canadians. This means that Canadians won't have any tax to pay for 2 months on groceries and other essential goods that they use every day. We're putting more money back in the pockets of Canadians so they can buy what they need and save to buy what they wish.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, to show how weak he is, he actually has to read a script just to talk about his tiny 2-month tax break. My question a moment ago, though, was about the deficit. He admits that deficits contribute to inflation. We now have reports from the Parliamentary Budget Officer that he appointed showing that the deficit is far bigger than he advertised in his last budget. So once again, I'll ask slowly, what was Canada's federal deficit last year?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I'll take no lessons from someone who stays up late every night rehearsing his little performances in the mirror. The fact, Mr. Speaker, is we're continuing to step up for Canadians because we have the lowest deficit in the G7. We have the best debt-to-GDP ratio and are projected to have the strongest growth in the G7 ahead of the United States next year. These are things that we've done because we've been investing not just in Canadians and support for them, but also in drawing in global investment. Third largest foreign direct investment in the world last year, Mr. Speaker. People investing in Canada because they believe in Canadians. Why doesn't the Leader of the Opposition believe in Canadians?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I know the Prime Minister said that he'll leave the economy to bankers. Well, the bankers are sure rolling in cash, collecting interest on the national debt that he has already doubled, while Canadians line up at food banks. Right. The question, though, was about the size of the deficit. You cannot run a $500 billion G7 government if you don't know anything about the finances of that government. So can the Prime Minister tell us, does he actually know the size of the deficit?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we are focused on is delivering for Canadians, is being there to recognize that Canadians need support now as we build a stronger future for them. That's why we're drawing in global investment to a higher rate than just about any other country per capita in the G20. We are delivering things that make a real difference in Canadians' lives, like dental care, like a school food program, like more spaces in childcare at $10 a day, like a tax break for the next 2 months, like direct support for workers. All things, Mr. Speaker, that the Conservatives are voting against because they care more about themselves than they do about Canadians.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he doesn't know.
No, he doesn't. No.
That's scary. I was tempted to accuse him of hiding it, but you know, as Napoleon Bonaparte said, never attribute to malice what can be explained by incompetence.
Yep.
Mr. Speaker, who's actually running this government?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, while the Leader of the Opposition continues to focus on me, I'm going to stay focused on delivering for Canadians, delivering a tax break for the next few months that will help Canadians with the cost of everything, deliver on supports for workers, deliver on supports for seniors, deliver on supports for youth. These are all things that the Conservative Party votes against. Not because Conservative MPs don't care about these things, but because they've been throttled and muzzled by their leader so that they can't actually be their community's voice in Ottawa. They're there to be their leader's voice in their communities. Shame on them, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Order. The Honourable Member from Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, people...
Order, please. The Honourable Member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, people in my riding are counting us to deliver essential supports like the Canadian Dental Care Plan. But the Conservative Party's stubborn blocking of the House for their social media clips is putting this program at serious risk. This isn't about politics, Mr. Speaker. This is about access to health care in Canadians. Can the Prime Minister remind us all what is at risk if this House continues to put politics...
Excuse me. I'm going to... Colleagues. I'm going to ask all members to please not take the floor unless they're recognized by the Speaker. I had great difficulty hearing the answer to this question. So I'm going to ask the Honourable Member from Brantford-Brant, please, to not... I'm going to ask the Honourable Member from Brantford-Brant, please, to not take the floor while the Speaker is speaking. The Honourable Member from Vaughan Woodbridge from the top, please. The Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker, people in my riding of Vaughan Woodbridge are counting on us to deliver essential supports like the Canadian Dental Care Plan. But the Conservative Party's stubborn blocking of the House for their social media clips is putting this program at serious risk. This isn't about politics, Mr. Speaker. This is about Canadians. This is about access to health care. Can the Prime Minister remind us all what is at risk if this House continues with politics over Canadians? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for Vaughan Woodbridge for his hard work on the file and his question. Canadians are not surprised to see Conservative leader blocking key programs to support them. But I think we're all kind of surprised to see the NDP standing by. The NDP is actually helping Conservatives block dental care, health care for refugees, clean drinking water for Indigenous communities. The NDP owes it to Canadians to stop playing the Conservative Party's games, do the right thing, and end this obstruction of Parliament so we can all deliver for Canadians.
Order. Order. The honourable member from Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals' housing failure hurts people experiencing gender-based violence. Women's Shelters Canada found that because of the rising cost of housing, almost all shelters are unable to meet increased demand. This is forcing women into precarious housing or to return to abusive situations. The Liberals are compromising safety because of their failed housing plans, and the Conservatives care so little they heckle during this critical life and death question. Will the Prime Minister commit to increase investments in affordable rent-geared-to-income housing today?
Here's a question.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, no one should have to return to a violent or at-risk situation because they can't find housing, because they can't get into a shelter. That's why we continue to step up to work with provinces and municipalities to ensure that there are options for people fleeing domestic violence. It is a deadly serious question, Mr. Speaker, and we will always be there to work with provinces, territories, and municipalities to support women and anyone fleeing domestic violence.
The honourable member for Spadina, Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, in 2024, 358 people on the U.S. terror watch list were stopped from crossing into the United States from Canada. How did these terrorists enter Canada in the first place? The immigration minister's failure to secure our borders puts Canadians in danger, and his incompetence has now placed Canada's economy at risk with a 25% Trump trade tariff. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister fire this incompetent minister before he does even more damage to Canada?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the member should turn to his friend, the leader of the Conservative Party, and ask him why he is refusing top-secret briefings on national security. He should ask his buddy, the Conservative leader, why he will not get the security clearance necessary to understand how to better protect his party and Canadians. The Conservative leader refuses to take top-secret briefings or get a security clearance because he would rather play politics with Canadian safety than actually act to keep Canadians safe. Shame on that member. Shame on the Conservative
leader. Points of order. The honourable member for Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, as you know, not only can words be unparliamentary, but gestures can be as well. And I was in the process of negotiating with the government House leader whether or not we could get unanimous consent to table the text messages from the Liberal member for Vaughan Woodbridge when he was asking to join our caucus. Mr. Speaker, as I was in the process of doing that, the Liberal member for Vaughan Woodbridge made a very vulgar and rude gesture, giving the middle finger to this side of the House. That is extremely unparliamentary, and I would ask the honourable member to apologize.
Order. Order. The honourable member from Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, at this moment in time, I seem to be living rent-free in the heads of many of the Conservative members. It's unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, And it's unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, I did not do anything vulgar to the concerned member. I've been in this House for 9 years. I've always tried to act in the most honourable way with all members of Parliament and all things. I actually co-chair some committees with the Conservative members, and that is my reputation. I have nothing to apologise about, Mr. Speaker. I raise my hand to give the script to the page, and that's it, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
I see that the honourable member for Mégantic-l'Érable is rising on a new point of order. Mr. Speaker, you know that in this place we must respect the honour and the words of those who rise to speak. That said, people have the responsibility of being honest for their colleagues, for their constituents. Mr. Speaker, I saw the gesture in question with my own eyes. Right, so that's on the same point of order. I ask the honourable member to please sit. I heard the point of order. The member in question rose and said, honourably, I presume, that he did not make the gesture that he was accused of making. The honourable member from Mégantic-l'Érable mentioned that the chair does presume the honour and honourable nature of all members. That said, as one member has suggested, the chair will look into the matter and watch the camera feed. I will bring this matter up again if necessary. Point of order. The honourable member for Mégantic-l'Érable. I hope that this is not on the same point of order that the chair just ruled on. Mr. Speaker, I feel offended. You just cast doubt on my word and on what I said that I saw my colleague do, and I find that unacceptable, Mr. Speaker. It being 3:27, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the sub-amendment of Mr. Garrettson to the motion to concur in the 12th report of the Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Call in the members.